Today, we're talking shutter speed. What's up, guys? Jay Yadlovsky, Focus Photography and Design, helping you focus on your photography. Today, I want to talk about shutter speed. So far, we've talked about ISO, we've talked about aperture, and next is shutter speed. So, what is shutter speed? Shutter speed affects the motion in your images. Shutter speed also affects the amount of light that gets into your camera sensor. So, the biggest thing you're going to notice with shutter speed is that it affects motion in your images. If you use a shutter speed that's too slow and you're hand-holding your camera, you're going to notice a little shake in your image, or it's going to be blurry. It's not going to be so sharp. If you use a faster shutter speed, that will freeze the motion in your image. So even if you're shaking just a little bit, with a fast shutter speed, it's likely that you're going to get a clean, crisp image. So a low shutter speed of anything below, say, I don't know, a fifth of a second, a 25th of a second, is usually going to be a little too hard to hand hold. You're going to want to use a tripod for those kind of situations. And as your shutter speed increases, then you have a better ability to hold your camera and shoot at those higher shutter speeds. So I've got some images here. We're going to jump over to Lightroom. I'm going to show you a few images and show you what the different shutter speeds look like and how you can use shutter speed to your advantage. Maybe you want to show movement in something, and you can use a slower shutter speed to help you achieve some movement in your image. Or maybe you want to freeze the action. Maybe you're photographing sports, or say a waterfall or a water fountain, something spraying water, and you want to freeze those water droplets. You're going to want to use a fast shutter speed for that. So let's jump over to the computer and we will take a look at some images with both slow shutter speeds and fast shutter speeds. Now that we're here in Lightroom, I'm going to run through a few images showing you different shutter speeds and how a slow shutter speed can show motion in an image and a faster shutter speed can freeze the action. So here's a little video on how I took this next series of pictures. I basically just held out a light meter, I focused on that, and then I spun, and as I was spinning about 180 degrees, I took the picture. And this allowed for a slower shutter speed to create motion blur in the background and a fast shutter speed to freeze the background. So here, the first image is at 1/15th of a second. Again, I focused on the light meter that you see here in the picture, and then I just spun and took the picture while I was moving. You'd see nice blurry background here. You can see motion and that I'm moving. And as we go up to 1/30th of a second, that movement seems to slow down. The blur doesn't seem as much. If you look here, you have about that much, for example. Going up to 1/60th of a second, things are starting to become a little clearer. You can kind of tell a little bit what's going on in the background. 1/25th of a second, you can start to see it's a little blurry still, but it's becoming more clear of what's in the background. 1/250th of a second, 1/500th of a second, and it almost looks like it's not moving. And 1/1000th of a second here, there's no motion blur in the background. It's a little blurry just due to I was focusing close to the camera, and the background was a little farther away. And 1/2000th of a second here. So you can see there's no movement in the background. I was doing the same spinning each time. I have a few other images here to show you to demonstrate shutter speed. So here we have a fast shutter speed, 1/640th of a second. And you can see here it's freezing the drops of water as they come down. Now to your eye, this just looks like a constant stream. So if I slow down the shutter speed, I'll get an image like this, where you can see the streams of water look like they're consistent and continuous streams of water as compared to a faster shutter speed. The faster shutter speed freezes the action of the water, or the movement of the water. Here's another one of a little waterfall. I used a slower shutter speed, 1/20th of a second, and that gave me the nice cascading look of the water here. Looks like it's moving. You can see there's movement in the water. It's blurred together a little bit, and a slow shutter speed allowed me to capture this image. Again, here's a shutter speed of about 1/15th of a second on the beach one morning, and you can see the waves have movement to them. The water's not frozen. You can't see the little drops of water like you could in the previous image there. So 1/15th of a second, and that allowed me to capture movement in the waves. And here's one more picture of a waterfall. I used a 1/40th of a second, and you can see you still have some motion blur in the waterfall. Not as much. You can see the blur of a water drop here is about that far. and but you still see the movement of the water. It's not frozen. And if I went with a faster shutter speed, then I'd have all little drops of water and you'd be able to see the water frozen, the movement frozen. One important thing to keep in mind is that the slower the shutter speed is, the harder it is for you to handhold your camera and take a picture. Depending on your ability to stabilize the camera, whether you tuck your arms in tight or brace your camera on something, that's going to greatly affect the shutter speed at which you can shoot at. One good general rule of thumb to keep in mind is that whatever your focal length is, for example, 50 millimeters, you want your shutter speed to be at least 1/50 or higher, or as close to it as you can get. Another example, if you're shooting at 200 millimeters, you want to try and use a shutter speed of at least 1/200 or 1/200th of a second. And that'll help you reduce the risk of getting motion blur in your images. So what's one way that we can practice using our shutter speed? Well, if you take a look at the mode dial on your camera, you're going to have a mode called shutter priority. So on Canons, that's TV. On Nikons and other cameras, it might be S. And what shutter priority does is it allows you to select the ISO and the shutter speed. Then the camera will select everything else to make sure that you have a proper exposure. So you can pick your shutter speed and try a slow shutter speed and see what kind of images you can get. Or you can pick a fast shutter speed and then see what kind of images you get there. Now, all that's going to depend, too, on the amount of light you have available. With the exposure triangle, everything's based on the amount of light that you have available. So when you're using these other modes, other than manual, the camera's making decisions to try and get a proper exposure. So it might be hard if you're in a dark situation to get a properly exposed image and not have it be blurry or have it look the way you want it to look, because you don't have full control of all the settings yet. The camera's still making choices for you, and maybe those aren't the choices that you want to make. But at least using the shutter priority, it'll give you an opportunity to practice using the different shutter speeds and see what they do and how they work. I want to thank you for watching and stopping by my YouTube channel. I hope that I was able to help you out understand shutter speed a little bit better, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Subscribe over here, or check out other videos over there. One of those two. Take a look at those.